but it was actually the cheapest of all of Disney's 7 Star Wars shows and movies that were made in the UK.
This is just a black hole. They provide nothing in return. There's no money coming in.
So here's the follow-up article that Caroline just posted. Shout out to her again. The response I got on X, like people were saying Forbes is clickbait, and I'm like, come on. Y'all gotta stop. Not every Forbes writer is Paul Tassi, y'all. I keep trying to say this. Paul Tassi is one guy. He just happens to be the guy that in our circle is most often cited because he usually writes the most outrageously stupid things. But there are plenty of good people at Forbes that create content that's in our space. People like Caroline Reed, who does the business and financial side of entertainment, specifically Disney. Guys like Eric Kane, who I think is an excellent writer. Politically, he and I probably don't agree on everything, or maybe not even a whole lot, but I think Eric's a very good writer, and he's very honest, and he's not afraid to push back. And he doesn't have these wild goofball takes on stuff that he covers, like gaming and Hollywood and cinema and film and some of these things like Paul does. In fact, like I tell people all the time, it was so hilarious to watch Eric and Paul on the same day. We're going back and forth fighting each other about The Acolyte, not directly in the articles, but Paul would come out and say, this show's so great. It's so wonderful. Oh my God, it's got this and that. And Eric would write an article 2 hours later going, what the hell are people talking about? This show sucks. And it was just the funniest thing to watch. And they were both writing for Forbes. So you've got to see who you're talking about here. So Caroline Reed, the point of this, and everybody's looking at this headline going, wait, what? What? Come on. Come on. And I read this and I'm like, I think I know where Caroline's going with this, because she and I talk. I know how she thinks. She writes stuff in a very particular way, and people make the mistake of not reading the whole article to really see where she's going. There are people to this day who think that Caroline was groaning over the fact that Disney had a pay gap, a wage gap between its male and female employees. I had to keep explaining to people, no, that's not why Caroline wrote the article. Caroline wrote the article to troll Disney, because Disney was out there virtue signaling for years about how progressive it was and how equal employer and equal opportunity this and that it was, and employing all these women and blah, blah, blah. And of course, you know, they just had the class action lawsuit about that, right? So Caroline wrote an article exposing the pay gap at Disney.
Did they win that lawsuit, Valiant? I feel like there might be a pattern.
I think they settled it. Yeah.
Huh.
The point with Caroline didn't write the article lamenting, saying that there was, oh my God, Disney's evil because it screws women. I'm like, no, she made a point because Disney was so tooting its own horn about it that Caroline exposed the fact that the wage gap at Disney is just as bad as anywhere else it's been alleged. So there was a point to this. So same thing here with this article. Okay. So that was the setup. We'll get back to this. Andor is actually Disney's cheapest Star Wars production, despite the $645 million cost. I read this headline and I'm like, I think I know where we're going. So she talks about the article that we just covered earlier this week when she wrote that. You're talking about what Andor's total cost was. We just showed you the numbers. And this author's exclusive about the staggering spending on Andor was reported all over the world by leading newspapers and trade titles from Deadline, /Film Screen Rant, to Le Figaro in France and IGN in Latin America. They all understood the news perfectly, along with expert pundit Valiant Renegade. Oh, wait, that's me. Hi.
More notoriety, I believe, sir.
I guess. I'm sorry. Thank you, Caroline. We really appreciate y'all kidding aside. Culture Crave and Cosmic Marvel. However, some social media accounts analyzed it and reached the flawed conclusion that no Star Wars production could justify such high spending. While the evidence was accurate, there was a disturbance in the force when it came to the analysis. The social media accounts can't be blamed for this, as it's due to the Byzantine business model behind streaming shows. When that is taken into account, it doesn't just demonstrate that Andor was good value, but it was actually the cheapest of all of Disney's 7 Star Wars shows and movies that were made in the UK, which is most of them. Like Mandalorian and Ahsoka and all that stuff was Mandalorian for sure. Book of Boba Fett, all that was filmed in California. She's having to deliberately exclude those because she has no access to the financial data for those specific productions. Nobody really does except Disney because it's not made public when it's filmed in California. But in the UK, it is. If they film any part of it in the UK and they're trying to get a film tax credit, they have to report everything. Everything. They can't just say, this is the part that we filmed in the UK and report that. If they filmed 50% of it in California, they got to put that in there too. The UK has to know everything, so the reporting dictates that did they meet the minimum threshold of production or portion of production of this TV show in this case to actually be eligible for the credit. So that's why they have to do it that way. So she goes into the history of Disney buying Lucasfilm and Star Wars. And she goes back to talk about the reimbursement, how to qualify for it. Go read the article if you're not familiar with the particulars and you want to know. We've covered this a number of times. Caroline does a great job. Every article, she reintroduces the audience to the history of this and why. Because every article, she's getting more and more and more new eyeballs, okay? So here's the deal. This is the cost per minute. And I knew this is where Caroline was going. And I thought, oh, this is smart. I like this. The cost per minute of the productions that have been done in the UK for Disney. Remember we talked about this just a few months ago with The Acolyte right here on the Renegade Nation. And I told y'all, I was like, look, The Acolyte is ridiculous. It's going to be 250 plus, maybe 300 million when it's all said and done. When you look at the fact that these episodes were on average a half hour in length a piece, maybe 40 minutes, there's 8 of them. It's not that big of a show. And it was playing at the same time up against House of the freaking Dragon with 8 episodes that were an hour apiece, literally nearly double the runtime. And yet somehow House of the Dragon came in, and I'm going to tell you right now, cheaper than The Acolyte for twice as much finished photography. Somebody's spending too much money, and it's not David Zaslav. So Caroline did this list and broke it down. The Force Awakens, per minute of finished photography, meaning per minute of finished product that hit a screen, be it a big screen or a small screen, movie theater, TV. 4.6 million. Total cost for The Force Awakens, $641 million as reported to date for the production entity responsible for The Force Awakens. Does not include marketing. None of these include marketing. By law, that these reports that are filed in the UK by law may not include any marketing or distribution expenses. It is strictly production and production only. Pre-production, principal photography, post-production. That's it. Rise of Skywalker, also known as Rise of Palpatine. Nearly $600 million spent in total cost to date, according to the financial filings in the UK. 4.1 million per minute. Last Jedi, 2.7 million cost per minute. Solo, 2.7 million per finished minute of photography. Rogue One, 2.4 million. Acolyte, 0.7 million. Remember, that was the figure I told everybody. Remember what we were comparing this summer about The Acolyte? I said it was a roughly $750,000 per finished minute of photography for The Acolyte. $750,000. I think I actually had calculated $735,000. The cost per finished minute of House of the Dragon was something like $350,000. It was less than half of The Acolyte. Just to give you a point of reference here, kids. Andor, 0.6 million. Andor's average length per episode was much longer. And I think in the article, obviously, you can look here, 1,094 minutes of finished product. Okay? And this is where it's coming into play. I think there was about 500 some odd minutes of runtime for season 1 because those episodes were lengthy, much longer than your other Disney shows, if memory serves. And I think she's extrapolating out. She's basically saying, okay, if season 2 replicates season 1, I think this is the estimate, because we have no idea how long each episode is yet because it's not been announced. They're not finished being put together. So I think Caroline is basically taking season 1's total runtime and then doubling it, if I'm not mistaken here.
So let me let me push back just gently, and I wouldn't surprise me if Caroline is watching right now. And I agree with everything that's in this chart, obviously. Yep. The one thing that I will say is that at least The Force Awakens brought in money. All of these brought in money until the last two. This is just a black hole. Yep. They provide nothing in return. There's no money coming in.
This is her point, and I think she does bring this up later in this piece. And that is that the justification, at least for The Force Awakens, The Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, and yes, even Solo and Rogue One, is that Disney spent this just the raw dollar amount that they spent. Disney spent that raw dollar amount. At least they got something back for it in the theater. Even in the case of Solo that lost its ass, obviously, right? They lost hundreds of millions of dollars on that. At least they got something back for it in the theater. They probably got a little something more selling a few physical media sales and digital downloads. They still lost money on it, but the point is that had Solo or TLJ or Rise of Palpatine or The Force Awakens, had any of those or all of them just gone straight to Disney Plus, that would have been a complete boondoggle. So, and that's her point, is that when you look at this, you know, first of all, how efficient per finished minute of product are we producing here? Now, of course, there's also some deference to be given for the fact that the cost of producing, in theory, or it used to be before the Writers Guild and Actors Guild strikes, the cost of producing a streaming show would be typically less, usually significantly less, than making the same thing that was going to be theatrically released because of the distribution model, right? It's the same thing as if I shoot a commercial for Ford, they're going to do a $50 million national ad campaign. The people that are going to produce that commercial, that are actually going to shoot it, edit it, and put it together for Ford to use the ad company, are going to charge a lot more money to produce that commercial, even if they made the exact same commercial for a group of dealers in Louisiana exclusively, and the commercials would just run in Louisiana. You charge according to the distribution model for stuff like this when it comes to marketing. So the idea is that typically you'd pay less to make a streaming show than you would for a movie. So the cost of the films themselves are already, in theory, inflated because they're making it for the big screen versus for a TV show. Now, obviously, they also spend more money to make it look better and sound better and all this because it's going in the theater, but that's changed now, right? You're not getting away with saying, well, it's just for streaming in the new era. That's what the strikes in Hollywood were all about. And it's also why the reaction from places like major film studios, TV studios, even Netflix and Amazon has been to cut back and pull back on what they're spending on content because, hey, we're just not going to make as many projects. We're just going to make fewer projects, but more of them be very high quality projects. I just found this chart interesting because it goes to show, and that this does not mean that Andor is a success, and it doesn't mean that Andor is cheap. I just found this fascinating how she put this chart together with all the projects, because we just talked about this over the summer with not Andor, but with The Acolyte as compared to House of the Dragon.
Absolutely. And whatever you may say about the chart, one thing is for sure, Kathleen Kennedy knows how to spend some money.
Well, that's the thing, right? And there's more and more articles coming out. Like, how is she still there? How is this still? Again, these are all questions that Disney's going to have to answer. Obviously, we don't know yet what kind of money is being spent on the Mando movie. But my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, is that the Mando movie is being shot, at least part of it's being shot at Pinewood, is it not? Or it was. I think they completed principal photography.
I think the Mando movie was put to California specifically to avoid this.
Was it? I know they shot a lot of it in California. I wasn't sure whether or not they shot it.
I think they kept it out of the UK this time.
Okay. I remember seeing Los Angeles and Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken, on the production list for Mando.
By the way,
Canada,
Brian,
US. Yeah.
Look at the total cost. You add the total cost of that up, you get almost to the amount that Disney paid for Lucasfilm in its entirety. And that's not on everything they've done. That's just the UK stuff that we can look up.
No Mando season 1, no Mando season 2, no Book of Boba Fett. No, what else are we missing on there? Well, Skeleton Crew, of course, is not included in there yet. Is that
no Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny on there because it's not Star Wars.
Oh, I'm thinking straight Star Wars.
No,
yeah, Indiana Jones. Yeah, Indiana Jones and the Dial. Yeah, because that's Lucasfilm. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. How about this? Doesn't include any marketing. Add another $2 billion to maybe 2.5, maybe $3 billion. Because yes, you do have to market shows that go on Disney Plus. It still costs money to advertise them to get people to watch it.
But every 2 months, there's an article that says Disney has made X amount of billion back. They've surpassed the amount they spent on Lucasfilm. Great investment. No. And these nimrods don't know anything. They just put out articles and they don't know anything about how this works.
No, David. You could say, looking at, if you take the Disney Plus shows off the list and you put the remainder in, you put just the 5 movies, and we did a whole video about this a year ago. Maybe it's time for me to repost it or republish it or whatever, refresh it on my site. We did a whole video on this a year ago. And the data that Caroline has here for the 5 movies is even more current because there have been more things filed, little bits and pieces at the end since then. So, but the point is this. Because yes, believe it or not, costs are deferred. They accumulate over time, so on and so forth. But the idea here is that the films really didn't make money when you add them collectively up, the 5 films. If you take all their costs and you take what the share of the revenue that they received from global distribution in the theater, and of course you throw in marketing costs, they barely broke even or they lost money. More likely they lost money. You can go and add in after the fact things like physical media sales for the earlier films before Disney Plus came about. Because remember, Disney Plus came out right when Rise of Palpatine came out. Because Mando and Rise of Palpatine came out at the same time, right? About a month or 2 apart. $2.5 billion on Galaxy's Edge. We've been down this road before. Go watch the video on that. But I just wanted to, bring this to everybody's attention. There's a lot more great information in here. I encourage everybody to go check out. This is the new article that Caroline just dropped yesterday, December 28th. And but people looked at it and go, oh, she's shilling for Disney because she's trying to say that it's okay that they spent. No, she's the one that broke the news they spent this much. Y'all have got to read her articles. It's like she is not. Caroline's a great writer. She's a good person. And she loves going after Disney. I had somebody, I think, refer to me as like a Disney shill or something today on Twitter. I'm like, dude, you picked the wrong guy to call that.
You got a weird bingo card today. Let me tell you.
I don't know what my bingo card's going on today. I'm like, dude, no.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.